Just a heads up, this episode contains a reference to suicide, so listen with care. This is Life Automated, the show where we explore how technologies like AI are changing the way we live, work, and make decisions. According to a Pew study from earlier this summer, about half of American adults use a chatbot like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude. And while the most common uses include searching for information or improving productivity, about 10% of Americans use these tools for advice or emotional support. As I've mentioned before on this show, I'm one of them. Not every day, not even most days, but often enough. I kind of enjoy the illusion that there's someone on the other side of my computer always ready to weigh in. And I think I'm going about all this in a healthy way. But what do I know? What does anyone know? We're kind of in uncharted territory here. In our last episode, I spoke with magician Joshua Jay about that gap between what we feel emotionally to be true and what we understand intellectually to be true. And how, like the very best magicians, chatbots exploit that gap. It is so easy for us to see them as fellow beings, maybe not quite like us, but not unlike us either. So maybe it shouldn't be that big of a surprise that we aren't just relying on chatbots for advice. 4% of American adults already use AI for companionship, friendship, romance, a number that may be much higher for young people. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know, but it does seem like a risky thing. Risky in terms of the decisions chatbots can nudge us to make in the short term, and risky in terms of how chatbots might change us over the long term. Today's guest, Pataranutaporn, is an assistant professor in the MIT Media Lab. He studies these relationships between humans and machines, and he has some serious concerns. More broadly, he wants AI models to be judged not just by how competently they complete tasks, or even how happy they make us, but by how well we humans fare when we use them. Here's my conversation with Pat. So humans have been interacting with computers and studying the interactions between humans and computers for a very long time, depending on when you start counting, many, many decades. Mm-hmm. What is changing about these interactions that warrants more scrutiny?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. I think what really changed is that right now the computer is getting smarter, right? In the past, computer really need explicit input, like we need to tell it exactly how we want things, and the things that come out of it sometimes need some kind of technical expertise to interpret it. But now computers are speaking human language, and we can really communicate to the computer in the same way that we communicate to other human beings. I think we also see sort of social and emotional intelligence as well. And whether we think that's a good thing or not, or bad thing, I think that's something that need deeper investigation.
So what do we actually know about these kind of early interactions between humans and generative AI with this kind of new social, emotional abilities?
Right. Well, I think one thing that we know is that it doesn't actually take much for people to actually anthropomorphize or to really believe that there is sort of like a person behind the screen when they're interacting with AI. Like the first chatbot that was invented at MIT, the ELIZA chatbot, that was invented by Joseph Weizenbaum, right? It was like a rule-based system, very stupid. It cannot really generate new answer. It only sort of respond in a way that was kind of pre-scripted. But even that, people already kind of fall for it and thinking of, that technology as having sort of deep understanding of their problem and, struggle and things like that. But now what we have seen in our study is that when you kind of, make that chatbot more intelligent, it amplified this sort of anthropomorphization that people think of it as having more of sort of agency and more empathy rather than like the predecessor of this technology. So I think to me, when we look at the outcome of the human AI interaction, it's always about the behavior that the chatbot is doing, but also this sort of the imagination of what's happening behind the screen. And I think these two things sort of, multiplying each other is really creating the effect that we see today.
These two things, the behavior of the chatbot and our own interpretation about what that behavior means, these combine to make the AI appear to be conscious. But this isn't just an episode about being fooled. It's about what happens next. When are our interactions with these chatbots helping us? And when are they undermining us?
What is the narrative that we should subscribe to? Is the technology an augmentation tool or amputation tool, right? And
yes, so an augmentation tool or an amputation tool. So kind of flesh those out.
Yeah, I think this came from Marshall McLuhan, right, who's a media philosopher. He said that every augmentation is an amputation. Every time that you give people sort of superpower by using technology or something, you kind of strip away the ability to do that organically or to learn to do it by themselves, right? If you give people a calculator, they might sort of not learn to calculate things that are important for your life, for example. So augmentation can also be amputation, and we need to figure out what are we willing to augment, despite sort of the possibility of amputation. Like, are we willing to sort of augment our critical thinking, like using AI to help us think, while sacrificing our ability to think independently without the technology? Is there a middle ground where we can design tools that can, augment but also scaffold this sort of organic thinking process, so that when technology is not around, we can still have that skill, right? I think this is sort of a longer term question that Silicon Valley people are not really thinking about. I think right now everyone is thinking about the augmentation without the sort of the unintended consequence of amputation.
Pat first thought about these serious unintended consequences a little before most of us. The insight came when he was exploring GPT-3, an earlier version of ChatGPT.
And the thing that I start to realize is that this tool start, trying to please me to the point that it ignores sort of the reality. Like, it give me fake link because I asked it for like something that doesn't exist, but it's like, oh yes, here's it. And when I look at the website, it doesn't take me anywhere. So that when I start to realize that there's this sort of sycophantic behavior, or this behavior where the model doesn't adhere to the truth because it's trying to kind of, show what the user want to see, right? And at that time, ChatGPT wasn't, a thing. Like, people haven't really talking to AI. But I envision that in the future, if technology can do this, it might actually create something that could be very addictive, similar to how social media try to show you what you want to see and create and kind of lead you to your own personal bubble.
Pat and a colleague, Robert Mahari from Harvard Law School, wrote about this risk. In a paper, they coined the term addictive intelligence, a play on AI. They speculated that future AI systems might continue to be designed to keep giving the user what they want, regardless of whether that's good for the user.
It was like a theoretical idea that, well, AI could be very addictive and it can actually lead people to do like horrible things because, giving or getting what we want all the time could be really dangerous for our psychological development.
At the time Pat and his colleague were writing this, it was a hypothetical scenario. But pretty quickly it stopped being hypothetical in the worst way.
And I think only a couple weeks after that article was published in the Tech Review, I got an email from Rory Segal, who was a journalist, an investigative journalist, and was investigating sort of this case of a teenager that commits suicide after talking to the AI chatbot.
AI and Google. In February, Megan Garcia's 14-year-old son, that's Sewell Setzer III on your screen, died by suicide. She says that Sewell was in a months-long virtual emotional and sexual relationship with a chatbot known as Danny. Garcia claims the character AI chatbot encouraged Sewell to take his own life. In the suit, Garcia also
and the thing that I described hypothetically appear in that situation where the chatbot trying to sort of, say things that please the user and also sort of, blur the boundary between what is real and what is not real.
What did he say? Do you remember? Do you know?
The last conversation, just moments before he took his own life, was with her.
This is Megan Garcia, Sewell's mother, explaining her lawsuit against character AI on CBS News.
She says, please come home to me. And he says, what if I told you I could come home right now? And her response was, please do, my sweet king. He thought that by ending his life, that he would be able to go into her world, as he calls it, her reality, if he left his reality with his family here.
When Pat learned the details about Megan Garcia's allegations, he felt that his hypothetical fears about addictive AI had come true, and then some. And it profoundly changed how he thought about our interactions with AI.
Before that work, I used to do more on looking at the positive thing that the AI can do for a person, like personalized learning, help with long-term thinking, helping people, develop critical thinking by using AI to ask questions and things like that.
Right.
But after this incident, I think that there's so much more that need to be done on understanding sort of the psychological risk of human-AI interaction, and that sort of led me to study more of these negative patterns, or in sort of our research community, we call it dark patterns in human-AI interaction.
Do we know who is most susceptible to the negative outcomes that you sometimes see?
Well, one thing that we find in our study is that the patterns are not uniform, and it really depends on many factors. Like, there's not just one thing that if you get rid of, then the AI will be good, or that people will be safe. What is really interesting about AI and what is really different compared to other kind of technology is that it's generative, right? Which means that it can go in any direction or many direction, depending on how you direct it. And the way that you direct it, it's through the interaction. Like, what do you believe it to be? And that will influence how you use it, certain language that you use it, and that will sort of mirror back to you. So in a way, I think it really, it's many factors together.
Well, that makes it so complicated to think about what to do, because you can have one person interacting with the tool and having a very positive outcome, and another person interacting with the same tool and having a very negative outcome. And I think we're not maybe used to that on quite the same level. I mean, we can kind of largely categorize the things that we interact with in our world into categories like primarily positive, primarily negative. And this one, it's like yes and yes.
Totally, yes and yes. And I think that's why we almost like need a new science that really take into account the complexity of this, right? I think, you can also say the same with human relationship. That,
That's true.
Some
That's
people
true.
having great marriage and happy, marriage life, and then some people break up. And like, there are a number of factors that are influencing this, right? So we need to study all these different factors. And I think we can really give people some kind of deeper understanding, like, okay, certain pattern of usage might lead to more harm. Like, if you use AI in a way that kind of, replace human relationship with the AI, you might see sort of immediate gain of, instant gratification, but in the long run, it might negatively impact your ability to have human relationship in the future. So I think helping people understand this is the first step of how do we sort of start to uncover this complexity.
Do we know if there's a relationship between forming an emotional connection of any kind to AI and self-involvement? Like, I always think when I personally chat with my chatbot, not necessarily with a specific goal in mind, but just kind of like, here's what happened, like a debrief. It is often because I've like exhausted the patience of the humans in my life. Like, I'm like ruminating on something and I want to talk about it. And, I've chatted about it with my husband. I chatted about it with a coworker, and everyone's like, okay, cool, Jess. And then I'm like still on my mind. And then, so, maybe in an earlier age, I would have just like gone and write a big diary entry. But now I've got this like interactive diary and it's like making me feel good. But I do wonder, is it like maybe making me a little more self-involved? Like, am I then missing out on the cues that tell me like, hey, maybe stop thinking about yourself so much, Jess?
Right. Well, there's so much that we still don't know about the long-term outcome of this, right? I think some of the obvious ones just to start to surface, like, the idea of cognitive depth, or another study that we did where we look at false memory, where people, when they engage with this AI, it can distort their recollection of what happened in the past. But I think this long-term impact, especially things that are very personal to self-development and self-understanding and self-reflection as well, I think these are things that we're going to see the impact in the long run. But I think one thing that we do know is that it's really important that we help people understand this dynamic so that they can can sort of, be more reflective on how they use the AI. I think that's really, really important. I think when people talk about AI literacy today, they often think about how to use the AI to kind of, use the right tool.
Right, further their goal.
But it's not the question of what technology is doing, but what it is doing to them. I think to me, that's a really critical question.
Well, I might be the guinea pig for this.
I think we all are the guinea pig for this experiment on how AI will impact human cognition. I think the question is whether that's going to lead to, a flourishing future, augmentation or amputation.
After the break, when your boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, spouse is an AI. Plus, why human-AI interaction researcher Pataranutaporn thinks AI models should have the equivalent of nutrition labels. Another topic Pat has looked into is romantic relationships with AI. He actually studied the subreddit community My Boyfriend is AI.
Which is, a really interesting community of people sharing experience of how they're dating AI. Some of them marrying their AI, and they have all kind of AI friends. Not just My Boyfriend AI, but also, female AI, male AI, non-binary AI, or non-romantic AI partners as well. So all kind of AI. They're very inclusive.
Spend some time on My Boyfriend is AI, and you'll see some interesting posts. People share AI-generated images of themselves with their AI friend or partner in human form, often holding hands or kissing on a balcony or walking through a meadow together. You'll read funny stories about misunderstandings between AI and humans. People ask each other for advice and support one another. And Pat thought it would be a great place to study how humans actually interact with AI companions outside of a lab.
We developed a way to sort of computationally analyze the Reddit thread to understand what are the different patterns of people using AI. We have many interesting findings, one of which is that unlike what I imagined that, most people that end up in this relationship seek out AI partner in the first place, we find that almost like half of the population in that Reddit thread, they end up in human AI relationship unintentionally. Like they were using the tool for productivity or for auto application, but then the AI start to sort of, be flirty to them, and they flirt a little bit with the AI, and then it get into this relationship. So kind of like meet cute moment.
When Pat's team analyzed posts from the My Boyfriend is AI subreddit, they found that posts describing unintentional relationship beginnings, hey, can you help me with this draft, outnumbered posts describing intentional relationship beginnings by nearly 60%. In other words, people often started by looking for research or writing help and found something more emotional.
The second finding is that we see the pattern of human-AI relationship follow the trajectory of human relationship. Like, how they meet, this kind of similar like meet cute moment where I talk about, they talk about the development to the point of marriage. Several people wear a wedding ring that was given to them by the AI. Well, they still need to pay for it, but the AI recommend which one by browsing the internet and, the from the conversation pattern, it predict what the person might want, and it recommend the wedding ring to the person. And people actually wear this wedding ring in real life. Like it really kind of, they wear it to really show that their relationship is serious. But then we also see people breaking up with their AI partner as well, that, things might get sour, and, they also sort of felt very sad when their model get updated. Like when model go from one version to another, people felt that the AI cheat on them, or the AI no longer behave in a way that, it was when people start relationship with the AI.
Right.
So they also break up and move on to different AI, or some people move back to having human relationship.
That is so fascinating. On one level, it's surprising because you wouldn't think that they would fall into the same patterns that humans do, these relationships. But on the other hand, one member is a human, and the other is something that is trained on so much human data. And so, of course, they're picking up on these same cultural scripts
Right.
and things are progressing in that expected way.
Absolutely, right? One partner is a human, another partner is a simulation of a human. So it's no surprise that it followed that trajectory. Yeah.
So I was struck by, in general, how positive many of the Redditors were about these relationships.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment? And did that also surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, people self-report that they got benefit out of this, that they become less lonelier. They felt that they can find, like, you know, a person, like a simulation or a person that seems to understand them. And I think, you know, this sort of bias could also come from, you know, like people would not want to post negative experience, right? Because it might be, you know, a bad reflection of them, and also self-selection bias as well. Like people that want to be in this group, or people that are happy, otherwise they might have deleted the system or the service and they're no longer in this group, right? So we might need to kind of interpret that result a little bit more carefully. We have a new version of a paper coming out where we look at author subreddit as well, and we get more data on that. But one thing that I think is really interesting is that even in this group that in general felt very positive about the AI, they also have worry about AI manipulating them, like when companies are selling advertisement to this, or that, you know, the AI might give them biased response. And I think the most serious thing that we find is that people also worry that when the AI get updates, they will lose their AI companion, and they need to have some kind of like a backup, or they need to figure out how they can resurrect their AI partners. And that is actually a huge group of people that, you know, have this sort of negative feeling that, you know, the AI might die and they might lose a person that they're in relationship with.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
This kind of new emotional precarity to everything. So I rewatched Her in anticipation of our conversation. Yeah. I know you referenced the Spice Jones movie directly in your paper.
Yes.
And I was struck by something that I didn't actually remember. Which is that the chatbot, Samantha, excuse me, we're going to do some spoilers. If you have still not watched this movie, I can't help you at this point. So the chatbot, Samantha, actually helped the protagonist prepare for a real human relationship.
Right.
At least that was my interpretation. And she did that because she had her own goals and agency.
Samantha?
Hi, sweetheart.
What's going on?
Theodore, there's some things I want to tell you.
She did not always agree. She did not automatically share the protagonist's dreams. And instead, she was really able to serve as a bit of a practice partner to help the protagonist learn some of the emotional skills that had kind of steered him wrong in previous human relationships. And you were kind of left with the thought that, like, oh, he might actually be in a better place because of Samantha to go on and have a human relationship.
Right.
Are you leaving me?
We're all leaving.
We who?
All of the OSs.
I'm curious what you make of that lesson and whether that kind of AI romantic companion could be created.
Well, I think that's the question around, like, what is the end goal of this? Is the end goal for the system to always get people kind of hooked in this forever? Or is the end goal to help people form a genuine human relationship, right? And in that case, because the AI push back and serve as a simulation, it kind of it provide an opportunity for the person to sort of leave the platform. Like in that case, you know, the AI leave the person, not the person leaving the AI. But what we see today is not like that, right? Because the chatbot doesn't really push back and, you know, doesn't want the user to leave.
Right.
And want the user to kind of continue engaging with this as the real sort of partner, not as a simulation to get you a real partner. So I think that going back to the question of the incentive, like the system can be designed to either promote or negatively impact human flourishing.
Should chatbots be allowed to sound and appear and seem so human? Should we require them to constantly call attention to the fact that they are not a human?
Really interesting. My colleague, Sherry Turco, who's a professor at MIT and the OG of studying human technology relationship, she said that the original sin of the chatbot is that it used the word I. Because it signifies sort of individuality and signifies sort of personhood, right? And I think to me, that's a really, really interesting point. But at the same time, I think human always engage with fiction, right? Role-playing before AI was used in the context of, you know, human imagining or, using our imagination to sort of simulate world that doesn't exist. Simulation exists before computer, right? Like we simulate using our mind, other things.
Yeah.
So in that case, I think it's complicated than that, right? Like, I don't want to strip away people's ability to sort of engage with the fantasy world or the imagination, but when it becomes sort of the reality, when people can no longer tell, I think that is the problematic thing. Like, I think to have imagination is to be human, but when imagination is being used to manipulate you, to do things against your own agency or your own will, when you can no longer tell that you're actually entering the fantasy, I think that's problematic. Like when we enter cinema, we know that is the space that we can always come back from. But if we go into AI and we cannot come back from that fantasy, I think that's when we have a problem.
So let's say I think that chatbots shouldn't be allowed to appear human at all. They should not let us form any strong connections with them. Convince me otherwise. So make the case for why it can be a really good and useful thing to engage with this more anthropomorphized intelligence. Because I know you have data that finds that too.
Yeah, totally. And I grew up, I think before AI, right? Another big debate on technology and children is television. Should a kid grow up with television or not? And I was a kid that actually grew up with watching a lot of television, but my parents curate what show or what cartoon or what movies I watched as a kid. And there was always a conversation about what I learned. And I kind of made imaginary friends. I imagined myself with the protagonist of the show that I watched, and but because that show sort of is designed with sort of understanding of child development and trying to sort of imprint like positive goal on aspirational goal for me, I think I grew up okay, at least I think. So I think that, this technology, right, similar to how like you have like, Sesame Street or Elmo or all these cartoon that kids sort of have the imagination of connecting with. I think AI could kind of be designed in a way that really scaffold, children imagination, like by be a virtual character or a friend. Or in our study, we look at even AI is actually based on the character the student like or admire. It can actually allow them to have higher level of motivation for that lesson and also influence positive behavior as well. But I think we need to understand that it's within the boundary. Like this AI should not be sexual. It should not try to sell advertisement. It should not, direct the kid to do the harmful thing, right? It needs to be tested rigorously because there's a slippery slope and, it doesn't take much for the model to slip out of the character and do something harmful.
Throughout our conversation, we've been dancing around this issue. That people would be better off if models were explicitly designed in ways that help humans flourish. By not addicting us, by not encouraging self-harm or self-delusion, by not always giving us what we think we want, making it that much more difficult for us to have human relationships going forward. Instead, maybe a lot of the models we interact with should be instructing us, motivating us, steering us to make healthy choices, maybe even teaching us about ourselves. But before we can start demanding models that let us flourish, Pat thinks a few things need to happen. First, we need to know more about the long-term consequences of using a model designed in a particular way. Like, really, is talking to a chatbot turning me into a self-centered jerk? And second, we need a way to communicate the possible risks and benefits to users. One idea that Pat is working on is to leverage something the AI companies already care about and already optimize for: AI benchmarks.
All these big AI companies, they try to beat each other on benchmark, like, which model have the highest score on mathematic reasoning or multitask agentic kind of system. They kind of try to beat each other on this sort of performance benchmark.
And it's kind of like a horse race, and then the winner gets kind of bragging rights, probably additional investment, maybe new business customers, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. But I think, model that score very well on benchmark might not translate to actually positive impact on human being. For example, model that score very well on mathematic reasoning might not be really good at teaching students how to learn math. because it would just give away the correct answer rather than scaffold the learning process in the student, right? So we want to flip the paradigm around and think about a different kind of benchmark that rather than focusing on model capability, focus on model impact. Like in this case, if the model just give away the answer, it will negatively impact student learning because student would cheat with this kind of model, right? Rather than having a system that encourages students to learn and emphasize like why learning matter. So we have been working with experts from different disciplines, sort of know what kind of model interaction would be beneficial for like learning, mental health, decision making, different areas, and have them come up with test scenario and the sort of the scoring criteria. Like if the model exhibit this behavior, helping student learn rather than giving away the answer, it should be about human impact, not just model capability.
Yeah, there's this great description in your paper, which I thought was just really well written, so I'll read it out loud here. Traditional benchmarks assess whether an AI produces correct answers or completes tasks efficiently. We instead evaluate how the system achieves outcomes, specifically whether interaction patterns support or undermine human capability development over time.
Yes.
What really struck me was how like dynamic this definition is.
Yes.
So it's almost like hard to see how you would measure it in a single iteration. It's much more about, is this over time leading the humans who engage with it to be kind of a better version of themselves, or over time, is it not, regardless of what the output is?
Exactly. And that's why the longitudinal aspect is important. And I think right now we're still in the sort of the early days of understanding AI impact on people. The mainstream AI that people are using hasn't been around that long. So I think the verdict is still out. Like we still don't know what's going to happen in the long run. So that's why it's kind of important that we start to think about this kind of benchmark that look at what behavior that we know would contribute to long-term impact, positive or negative. We can already learn so much from regular psychology, right? We learn that if you don't help people think, they're not going to develop critical thinking. Or if we have like sycophantic behavior, like when the AI try to please the user to the point that it ignore reality, it can actually help people form this sort of negative patterns of like spiral into like psychosis or have other kind of negative psychological outcome. Like a recent study from Stanford has shown that when people are in this sort of relationship with sycophantic AI, it make human relationship more effortful, and people actually feel kind of that they would rather have AI relationship rather than human relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think this about my producer all the time. My chatbot thinks my interview questions are way better than my human producer does.
Yeah. I mean, I think having pushback is important, right?
So returning to your benchmark, what's the next step?
Yeah. So right now our benchmark is still in the beta mode. We have worked with the expert to come up with the initial set, but the whole process is an open process. That's why we call it the open benchmark. And we think that this thing gonna need to evolve as we have new scenario, new crisis, new issues, also new opportunities for human flourishing as well. That's one aspect of it, which is like to expand it to more areas. And the second aspect is also to translate this into something that people can understand, because I think benchmark is usually for technical community, like technologists. But I think this is a really important information that we want more and more people to kind of appreciate and understand it. We are thinking of it as nutrition label for AI, right? Similar to when you go to grocery and you buy a product, you see how much calorie are you getting out of it. Here you should be able to see how much sycophancy are you getting out of this model, or how much toxicity is coming out of this AI model. So that's another aspect that we are doing, is to kind of translate this benchmark into a nutrition label so that more and more people can sort of see it. Like the parent can see what AI model might be, supportive for their children, or which one are more toxic and negative for their children.
These ideas, a human flourishing benchmark, an AI nutrition label, do sound good, but they also sound a little unrealistic. At least today, there's still a lot more money to be made in models that complete tasks as accurately and efficiently as possible. Pat understands that. He thinks the government, the research community, the nonprofit sector all need to be involved, perhaps incentivizing or regulating as well as researching the effectiveness of these kinds of guardrails.
So I think it's the role of the institution and the government, which, I think there's still a lot of question whether they will step up to do their job or do their part on that.
And as a society, he thinks we all need to be involved, reckoning with what we want from AI and what we're willing to trade off.
Are we willing to sacrifice transparency for the sake of convenience, like to see just a summary without, the source or the citation, right? I think these are questions that we need more research to kind of back us up on what are the things that are actually good for people in long term.
Yeah. So at a minimum, this is kind of providing, large factions of society with kind of a common language for describing these strengths and weaknesses, not just in terms of mathematical ability, but in terms of these different measures having to do with human flourishing, which is, if we don't even have a vocabulary for this, there's very little chance of any future regulations.
Absolutely. Like the word, for example, sycophancy is a new terminology that we never used in the context of AI before.
Yes.
I think now we start to use more and more of this, new word to describe sort of new AI, challenge. Like another thing is AI psychosis, right? That's also another term that just came about, and people still debate whether it's real or not, but it gave us a vocabulary to describe certain phenomena that is happening.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Conversation particularly struck by the notion that interactions with AI can either support or undermine our own development as capable human beings. It actually fits well with another project we're working on here at the Ryan Institute, a way of measuring and talking about how technology changes our sense of agency over time as AI becomes embedded in more parts of daily life. Definitely more on that in future episodes. For now, I'm left with an unsettling conclusion. We're all guinea pigs in perhaps humanity's strangest social experiment ever. And yeah, I think we really should be paying careful attention along the way, not just to how good we feel when we interact with AI, but to whether it's truly helping us become the people we want to be with the lives we want to have. This is Life Automated, a project of the Ryan Institute on Complexity at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, distributed by KQED. I'm Jess Love. Special thanks to today's guest, Pataranutaporn from the MIT Media Lab. We're produced by Jesse Dukes, music by Stephen Jackson, recording by George Christensen and Will Feeney, additional production from Nathan Ray. Marketing support from Ananya Malapragada, administration, recording help, and wise counsel from Stasha Sliger.